Hello, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending where you're joining us from. Very pleased to welcome you to our webinar today, where we'll be exploring the results of the GlobeScan Sustainability Survey into our 2020 sustainability leaders. Very excited. This is the largest and longest running survey of its kind, having been published for over 25 years. So some of the key topics we'll be talking about today will be looking at what sustainability leadership looks like for the Asia Pacific region, which organizations are leading the way and what we can learn from them. So let me start with some housekeeping. Very exciting set of speakers and agenda today, but we also really want to hear from you who've joined us today. So feel free to use the chat function, the Q&A function, for comments or questions throughout, and we will have a dedicated session at the end. Just to let you know a couple of points, we'll be sending the materials round to you all afterwards. And we've also enabled live transcript for this webinar. So if you'd like to use that function, you can select that at the bottom of your screen. So let me introduce who you will be hearing from today. My name is Kate Newbury-Helps. I'm with ERM's Corporate Sustainability and Climate Change team in Asia Pacific. I'm based in Bangkok. And I'm delighted to be joined by three experts today who you'll be hearing from throughout this session. Firstly, we have Victoria Gilbert from GlobeScan, who will be sharing the research results with us. And then in our panel discussion, we'll be joined by the Chief Sustainability Officers from two of the sustainability leaders in Asia Pacific, Anirban Ghosh from Mahindra and Madhulika Sharma from ITC. And I'll introduce you to them later on. So for our agenda today, we will start with a presentation of the survey results for Asia Pacific. We'll then have a panel discussion, and then towards the end, we'll move into an audience Q&A. So please note your questions throughout, and we'll come to them in the Q&A session. So before we start, just to kick off with an icebreaker poll, this should be popping up on your screens now. We'd love to get a sense of who's joined us today. So if you could select the sector which you're representing today, that would be great. So we can get a flavour of who has joined us from different places around Asia Pacific. Hopefully that gives you enough time just to enter that poll. Parashut and Maggie, if we can see the results, excellent, thank you. So interesting to see quite a lot of people from public sector, academics and NGOs. Welcome. We will for sure be sharing some relevant findings around NGOs in particular during the survey findings. From a corporate side, I can see lots of people joining from finance, from food, beverage and agribusiness, technology, manufacturing. So welcome all of you. Okay, with that, let me introduce our first speaker, who's Victoria Gilbert from GlobeScan. GlobeScan, as many of you know, is a leading global insights and advisory firm focusing on sustainability and brand purpose. And Victoria heads up the GlobeScan team here in Asia Pacific. Her experience as a sustainability professional includes extensive international experience, both in-house and consulting roles across Europe and Asia. So over to you, Victoria, to share the highlights of the survey results.
Thank you. I'm now unmuted. So thank you very much for the introduction, Kate, and good afternoon, everybody. As Kate mentioned, I'm Victoria. I head up the GlobeScan office in Asia Pacific. I'm very, very pleased to share with you today the results of our 2022 survey. This is actually the largest and longest running survey of its kind, tracking expert opinions on sustainable development leadership, I think for over 25 years now. So the results that we will share with you today are from 2022, but we have included tracking data so you'll be able to see some of the changes and some of the trends that we've seen over the last 25 years. It will be no news to anybody that sustainability has not only increased in importance, but it's also increased in awareness as we have moved on. So you can see here the methodology of over 700 experts surveyed across the world. Asia Pacific has a good representation, slightly lower than North America and Europe, but that increases year on year. The people that we survey have got a lot of experience in sustainability, with 72% have more than 10 years. So they know what's what. So we're going to look at a few different things. We're going to look at institutional leadership, NGOs and corporates. So everybody on the call should be interested, if not in all areas, at least in the one that you are from. So what we're seeing is that the urgency of climate change, again, no surprise to anyone, is top of the agenda. The perceived urgency has actually increased compared to last year. Sustainability experts now almost unanimously say that climate change is urgent. Energy security is also growing, and that is largely in the context of the war in Ukraine and the subsequent effects from that. And then most other issues, especially social issues, largely around access to medicines, poverty, and access to education, have actually decreased. So you can see here on the chart, those with the green arrow have increased in perceived urgency, and those with the red have decreased. So I think another one to pay attention to is up there at the top, plastic waste and air pollution. Again, anybody that is working and especially in the sustainability space in Asia Pacific is not going to be surprised. But we are seeing that those are remaining top of the agenda. I'm not saying reaching top of the agenda, because they have been up there for a while, but that just shows that we need to do something about it. So you can see here again, this is showing from 2009 to 2022, the urgency of climate change, which is the dark blue line, is definitely tracking upwards. And then the couple of others that were at the top of that previous slide, also having a bit more of a varied approach over the years, but you can see water scarcity starting to increase in importance. Interestingly, biodiversity loss starting to go down in terms of perceived urgency, and water pollution has remained pretty high throughout. So that gives us a flavour of what is going on in terms of the main trends. And when we ask people who should lead the Sustainable Development Agenda, so there's one thing recognizing the issues, recognizing the urgency. When we ask people about who should be leading on the Sustainable Development Agenda, what we're seeing, and this is the dark blue bar that we're looking at for 2022, is national governments. And this is amongst respondents in APAC, have increased. So 45% of people say that national governments should be leading, followed closely by multi-sector partnerships, and then private sector. Interestingly to note that private sector is actually down on 2016. So it's a down 6%, which is interesting because obviously more emphasis is being put on multi-sector partnerships and national governments, but it's still up there, it's still third. Interestingly, at the bottom, you can see that research and academic organizations, social entrepreneurs and NGOs are at the other end of the scale, not to say that they're not important, but the perceived role for them in terms of leading on the agenda is less than comparison with national governments. And that pattern is actually very similar to the global trend as well. So I mentioned a minute ago about the impact of the war on Ukraine. Obviously, this is something this year that is particularly significant. Last year, when we ran this study, COVID-19 was the big issue that was having a huge impact. Not to say that that's gone away, but I think that's sort of been absorbed into what people are thinking about. However, the war in Ukraine is new, and it is having a very significant effect on people's thinking around future, around sustainability. So you can see here that, and this is global data, the data I just showed you is APAC. Globally, experts are most likely to say that the war is actually a distraction from sustainability, and it's also leading to an increased use of fossil fuels. Experts also see food insecurity and high prices as some of the short-term impacts of the war. And relatively few believe that the war is helping to shift the focus to renewable energy in the short term. So some of those things that we were hoping would be at the forefront of the sustainability agenda now seem to be perhaps being sidetracked, or at least not looked at the moment, because there is this distraction due to geopolitical forces and what's going on in the world at large. In terms of the long term, so that's the short-term effects, is the distraction. In terms of the long-term effects, most don't see it happening now, as I just mentioned, but they do see in the long term that there will be an increased focus on using renewable energy. You can see here that now creeps to the top, and distraction from sustainability goes second. So although the focus on renewable energy is top, there is still a distraction. So experts are, I guess, divided in their opinion. Moreover, some predict a change in global and political norms. So there's a lot at play here, and I think the instability is leading people to sort of look on both sides and see and think about whether that can impact sustainability in the long term. In Europe and North America, largely, experts are more likely to say that the war in Ukraine will impact sustainability towards using renewable energy. However, a lot of people aren't sure that that will be the case. Of course, we're forecasting here, so we don't know, but we hope that there will be a positive outcome from a sustainability standpoint there. So moving to NGO leaders, every year we look at who is leading in the NGO space, and it is very apparent who people look to. So WWF are overwhelmingly recognized as leaders in sustainable development. This is the APAC data. This more or less mirrors the global data, with Greenpeace and World Resources Institute close behind. But we have found that WWF do top the agenda. You can see there with almost 25% of people recognizing them as the sustainable development leaders. In terms of how that has tracked over time and how they are doing in terms of advancing the sustainable development agenda, the group themselves has remained relatively consistent since 2015. You can see here there are some ups and downs. WWF there at the top. There has been a decrease in the past year, but it's still significantly ahead of the others. And Greenpeace also, that green line, just tracking slightly above the others in terms of having the two names that are leading on the agenda. World Resources Institute actually also has now been third on this list for the last 3 years. So perhaps we will see that continue to do so or increase as we go forward. In terms of what makes them leaders, because of course there's one thing being recognized as a leader, there's another thing as to what's the why. And you can see here that collaboration and innovation are at top of the agenda. So those two top bars. 2022 again is the dark blue bar. So if you're just looking at how that has changed over the years, we've mapped here 2017, 2019 and 2022 just for comparison. So you can see there has been a bit of a shift, but stakeholder engagement and collaboration is the main driver for NGO leadership. It has dropped from last year, but that is still top of the agenda. Relatively few experts mention activism and advocacy compared to 2019. So if you have a look there, the third one down, in 2019, it was 17%, and that has dropped to 6% this year. So that's very interesting. And it's similarly with communication and reporting, quite highly regarded in 2019, but less so this year. So what we're seeing is, yes, the stakeholder engagement piece and also innovation and knowledge is definitely up at the top, and that's what people want to see, and that's what people want to that's how people regard sustainability leaders in the NGO space. So moving on from the NGO space into the corporate space, we asked people how well each sector is performing in terms of managing its transition to sustainable development. And sorry for the headline here, it's a bit doom and gloom. Almost all sectors are viewed by experts as performing poorly on their transition to sustainability. It's a little misleading because there are some that are doing quite well. You can see there the technology sector and the automotive sector do have some good initiatives, but by and large, people's perception is that corporates are not doing that well in comparison to those that are doing well. And you can see there the green bar is those that are doing poorly. And mining, oil and gas, chemicals, you can see there at the bottom are the ones that are perceived as really having to do some hard work to move themselves towards a sustainable future. With regards to who is doing this, this is global data, which I wanted to show you first before we delve into the APAC data. We see Unilever, our sustainability leader, and this is unchanged from last year, with also Patagonia a close second. And then we are seeing Natura, IKEA, and Microsoft also making up the top 5. Microsoft has not been in the top 5 before, so that's new. The other 4 have remained consistent over the last couple of years. So they are definitely still perceived as the leaders, and they are also doing a lot to remain up there. If we look a bit further down, so these are the top mentions. There's a lot of companies that are headquartered outside of APAC. We see Tata there, and we'll talk about that later when we look at the APAC specific data. So when we look at tracking data, this chart showing from 2010 to the last 12 years, about how they've been tracking over these 3 years. You can see Unilever way out at the top there. There was a bit of a drop in around 2019 and also 2021, but they are still definitely the most recognized. And you also see there Patagonia has been increasing over time, a slight drop, but I don't think anything too significant. The others just sort of have remained where they are, and I do think perhaps we will see some others emerging in the years going forward as people start to put a higher emphasis on sustainability and start to realize and integrate sustainability more proactively. You can see there Microsoft, you know, the dark green line. Microsoft has been in that sort of top recognized field for a while, but it is slowly starting to increase, and depending on what they do next, that might continue in the future. So looking specifically at APAC, Asia Pacific, Tata is the leader with 13%. You can also see their city developments in Singapore as a close second. Third is Mahindra and ITC, which of course we are going to be learning a little bit more about, speaking to and finding out why and how and some of the challenges that they face. I won't read them all out, but you can see there there's a variation. Of course, Asia Pacific is a huge region, which is made up of very varied countries, but you can see that there's representation from across the region, which is interesting. Tata is the only one, as I mentioned earlier, that actually features in the global top. So there's a little bit of work to be done in Asia Pacific to be recognized on a global level, as well as being recognized at the Asia regional level. Taking a quick look at how that stacks up against the other regions, this is just a breakdown of how that global data, so the one that I just showed you with Unilever overwhelmingly at the top, from a global perspective, how the regional results came out. So this is when experts were asked to identify sustainability leaders among companies headquartered in their regions. So it was people in those regions answering the question, and a few clear recognized leaders emerge. As I just mentioned, Tata in Asia Pacific. Latin America is an interesting one because you can see their Natura & Co are way ahead, over 50% of people mentioning Natura & Co. While in Africa and the Middle East, There's actually only 3 companies mentioned. So a very interesting different spread. And then when we look to North America, Patagonia, Microsoft, no surprise, at top of the agenda. Interestingly, Tesla also up there, but not making the very top. And then in Europe, probably also worth a mention is IKEA, who are doing a lot of work, but still sitting behind Unilever. So when we ask people why, and I think this is probably the most important one, because this is the one where we can look to demonstrate leadership, we can look to advise others on how to achieve sustainability leadership, and look to other regions perhaps for case studies and for examples. We ask people why, and there's lots of different reasons why Unilever and or Tata and or Mahindra or whoever it is are recognized as leaders in sustainable development, and that has evolved over the past 12 years. You can see here there has been some changes, there's been some ups and downs. Companies are increasingly considered as leaders for putting sustainability at the core of their business models and strategies. However, we are seeing that decrease in the last couple of years, because people are now saying that they want to see evidence of impacts and actions on those sustainability initiatives. And for me, this is really important, because I think integrated into business strategy seems to be becoming a table stakes. You cannot just have it as a standalone report or a standalone department. Sustainability actually has to be the core of what you do. But equally, purpose and values, which we see somewhere in the middle there, the bright green one, are important, but people really want evidence of impact and action. And that's the one that we're seeing increase, and that's the one that people are talking about a lot. It's fantastic to make plans. It is advised to have a strategy, to have big, bold, ambitious targets. But what we're really seeing is that people want to see evidence of impact and evidence of actions. I know in the Q&A we'll be talking to our panelists, and they'll talk a little bit about that and how they do that, some of the challenges around it. But I think that's a key takeaway, is that people want to see integrated sustainability approach, and they want to see evidence of impact and actions. So with that, I will hand back to Kate. Hopefully shared some interesting insights there to get your brains whirring and thinking this afternoon, and look forward to hearing from our speakers next.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Victoria, for sharing those insights for Asia Pacific region. Hope that's left you with some key takeaways, maybe some questions. If so, please feel free to post questions into the chat so that we can take a note for our Q&A session. Before we move to the panel, another quick poll for you all. So if we just launch the poll, picking up on the insight that Victoria just mentioned from the survey around these top 3 attributes of sustainability leaders, would really like to ask your views on these 3 and how that's playing out in your companies. Which of these do you find most challenging? And we'll be exploring this a bit with our panel as well. So hopefully the poll's appearing for you. Please feel free to select one of the 3. We've only given you one choice. And let's take a look at the results. Maybe give it another minute or so for folks to complete that before we take a look. Okay, let's see. Maybe let's take a look at the poll results if we can. Thank you everyone for completing those. Okay, so interestingly, the one that people on the call are finding most challenging is that point that Victoria mentioned around providing evidence of impacts and actions, as well as innovating products and services as well. So thank you for sharing. Hopefully that's got you thinking, and we'll explore a bit more with our panel as well. All right, so with that, let me introduce our panelists who are joining myself and Victoria today. First of all, welcome to Anirban Ghosh, who is Chief Sustainability Officer for Mahindra Group, where he leads the development and implementation of sustainability strategies across Mahindra Group companies. Mahindra Group, for those of you not so familiar, spans a very wide variety of industries, including automotive, energy, finance, real estate, just to name a few. And Anirban's been with Mahindra for over 20 years in different capacities, where he's been a driving force behind many of the companies most high-profile sustainability achievements. And he was recently recognized in the Green Biz list of 12 C-suite sustainability champions last year in 2021. So welcome, Anirvan. And also welcome to Madhulika Sharma, who's Chief Sustainability Officer for ITC Limited, which is also a conglomerate spanning FMCG, agribusiness, hotels, packaging and technology sectors. She's been Chief Sustainability Officer since December 2021 and previously had a 30-year career with Tata Steel. So in her role now with ITC, she works to integrate and implement sustainability across different functions. And she's also recently been recognized as one of the top 25 sustainability superwomen in Asia by CSR Works. So thank you so much to Madhulika for joining us today. Just a reminder, as we start the panel discussion, please feel free to post your questions for the panelists into the chat, and we'll be opening for questions shortly. Okay, so let's start with some discussion maybe around sectors. So we heard from Victoria that the technology and automotive sectors have been viewed most positively in Asia Pacific. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around what these sectors are getting right in managing sustainability and what can other sectors learn. Perhaps first of all, Madhulika, I'd invite you to reflect on the technology sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate, and thanks for inviting me for this panel discussion and being part of this webinar. So on the technology sector, I think it's not only, and we saw in the poll results also, so it's not only in APAC, but I think globally also, you know, the technology, the ICT sector has been leading the sustainability commitments and also walking the talk, whether it is Microsoft or Apple or Google. And and that's what gets reflected also in APAC, and especially in India. If you look at you know, some of the top companies, ICT companies like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, etc., they have taken bold commitments, and which are the commitments of being net neutral. They are ahead of, say, the country's commitment. So obviously, while India has a certain commitment, the commitments of Infosys is to be carbon neutral. They are already carbon neutral and they want to be net zero by 2030. Similarly, TCS has some very bold commitments. So I think the reason is there's a practical side to it, and there's of course there's a technology side to it. I think the practical side of it is that probably one is that it is, while I'm not kind of saying that they have not done a lot, but I think their overall footprint in terms of whether it's emission or energy or water is limited. Their scope 1 and 2 is very, very limited. And there are already technologies available in terms of either switching to more renewable energy in their you know, operations, or using more green building, or you know, using more energy efficient equipments, which is, you know, large servers, etc. And COVID has in fact helped this sector in terms of actually reducing their scope 3 emission, which was coming in the form of travels. And with a lot of work from home, I think, you know, maybe their journey has actually accelerated. But then they have also shown the world that there are ways and, you know, means of actually walking the talk. And the other part is where they are actually leading and contributing a lot for other sectors is that because they are technology sectors and they have been one of the early movers of actually using, you know, blending the IT or data management into hardcore manufacturing, or things which were thought of as, you know, something separate from technology kind of a thing. And most of these companies have actually used AI and a lot of data management or a lot of data analytics to improve their energy efficiency big time. And now they are actually helping the world with providing these solutions as part of their client advisory. So ITC Infotech, so ITC also has an Infotech business under it. And for example, they have now a client advisory and they have already helped their clients to reduce 20% in terms of energy efficiency. The other key thing I think is that they have also been leading in incubating some of the startups and the whole ecosystem of startups. And, for example, if you see Infosys, they have, I think they have been one of the very early movers in the country in India to actually have an incubation for clean technology. And because they also have the might of money, and most of them are very cash rich, or they have been making profits, unlike some of the other manufacturing sector. For example, I had a long stint in steel sector, and one of the key things that the sector was looking was like access to finance to actually fund their green transition. So this sector, I think, has been again a front runner in terms of actually sharing some of the reserves that they have in terms of finances in accelerating large scale projects and also incubating some of the future technologies. So this is my take on why ICT leads the pack, whether it is in APAC or globally. I think this is one of the key reasons. These are some of the reasons I think that it is there.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Madhulika, for sharing those thoughts on, I guess, some of the challenges and strategies that are unique for this sector, and also, as you say, the enormous potential of the sector to solve some of the SDGs and sustainable development challenges. Anirban, I'd pass to you maybe to reflect on the automotive sector, which was the other sector highlighted in the Asia Pacific region.
Thank you, Kate. The ratings kind of reflect which are the industries that have done whatever could possibly be done, or at least adopted available solutions at scale. Madhulika's articulated it nicely that some industries are in a position to decarbonize faster. ICT is certainly one of them, as is automobile manufacturing. The good thing for automobiles is that the product solution, which is electric mobility, is coming along quite well. And every automobile company is making the transition, and it's a very public transition. It's as much of a technology transition for the industry as it is climate action being taken by the industry, which is why probably that the automobile sector gets good ratings in the list of sectors that have taken action. But the core thing, it's a very large problem. Some sectors have more solutions available to them at this time and some don't. But the important thing is to adopt whatever solutions are available at scale for your own industry at this time, so that you are ready to do more as newer technologies come along. That is the only way we're going to solve this climate problem. And I'm happy that some sectors are taking the lead in doing what can be done.
Great, thanks, Anirban, and great point around many of these sustainable development challenges actually presenting big opportunities for many of these sectors when it comes to their products and services.
Right.
Wanted to now turn to the three attributes which we talked about as highlighted for why the leading companies were identified as leaders, which we mentioned in the poll just now. Victoria, maybe first of all, I would invite you to share any further reflections on those attributes and how they've changed. You touched on it a little bit in your survey presentation, but anything you would add or highlight?
Yes, I did touch on it a little bit, and I think I'll just reiterate what I said, which is I think over the past few years we have seen a shift away from companies defining their purpose, their vision, which is absolutely important. It's kind of the foundation of the rest. So we're not undermining its importance in any which way, but I think what we're finding is that companies, especially like the ones that we've got on the panel today, they sort of know that. That's been defined. They don't need to spend every year talking about what that is. And actually what we've seen is a shift towards, okay, we know what our purpose is, we know what our vision is, we know where we want to go. This is the way we're going to do it. So the roadmap or the strategy that they want. That's the piece which I talked about integrating into business strategy. Again, a lot of companies struggle with that because it was sort of like sustainability existed over there and business existed over here. But we're seeing the two either come together, or some companies are actually just addressing them from the very start as one and the same. And now which is a very exciting era to be in. We're in the era of impact. So we've sort of moved away from the era of purpose, where people are sort of figuring out, well, what do we exist for? Why should we look at this? To having had 10 or so years of leaders really working very hard to integrate it, to figure out what the goals are, what the KPIs are, what the strategies are. And now we're looking at impact. Some companies are at different parts of that spectrum. And that's absolutely fine. Of course, everybody, you can't jump to impact. If you could, we'd all be in a very different place. We'd be having a very different conversation. And I think, yeah, that's what we're seeing. But what we are also seeing reflective of the poll is there's a big challenge around demonstrating impact. So as much as people want to see it, and they want to say, if you want to be a leader, you need to show what you're doing and not just talk about the fact that you want to do it. This is where there's a big challenge for companies, because it's not that easy necessarily to see the impact of some of the things that people are putting in place. So ambitious targets, yes. Clear purpose and vision, yes. Integrating it into business strategy, they're all fundamental and they're becoming what you need to get there. But I think we're now taking a bit of a leap, and that is into the impact and evidence piece. So that sort of throws a challenge out there more than a solution. I'm happy to talk about solutions another day, but I think it'd be more interesting to throw it back to you, Kate, and I know you've got some questions for the others about how they view this and how they have managed to do it in their companies.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria, for adding a bit more colour from the survey. And yeah, it would be great to have Anirban and Madhulika's take on this in terms of how you have integrated sustainability into your companies, but also how you're now thinking about some of these other points around evidencing impacts and integrating into products and services, and maybe what have been some of your challenges or lessons learned through that process. Maybe Anirban, invite you first of all to share.
Very well, Kate. You know, the first point about integrating sustainability into the work of the business is easier to do when you have purpose, intent, and senior management support. Whichever organization has these three things going, you will find sustainability embedded into its business very well. So what does embedding into business really mean? The way we've looked at it in the Mahindra Group is that you should have an overall target, a direction that should get deployed into the business, into the various functions. There should be programs to be able to achieve those targets. And there should be a way of measuring progress, a way of rewarding, a way of assessing, auditing, and all of these then get embedded into various functions as activities that need to be done during the year so that the business keeps making consistent progress. If you speak to any of the organizations who've come out as leaders, you will probably hear the same story of how targets were set and how programs were built and how they're assessed and so on. But like Victoria said, many leaders have been at it for 10 years or more. So a lot of programs have been implemented, and it is time to see what sort of impact have these programs created and whether the impact is in line with the science-based target goals and the carbon neutrality goals and so on. So when it comes to impact, we are today able to say things like, okay, over 10 years, we've reduced the energy required to make a vehicle by 60%. We are able to say that we harness more water than we consume. These kinds of outcomes are articulatable today. But if you want to take the next step and ask the question, so what is the impact it has on your profit and loss statement? What's the financial impact of the climate action that you're taking? Or how do you quantify the risk that you're managing by taking climate action? I think there is a lot of work to be done to be able to do this well and to be able to do this consistently. Don't think there are standards available or processes or methods available that businesses can pick it up and run. So while we are making progress on articulating outcome, I think there needs to be a greater degree of sophistication on articulating impact going forward. I'm sure we'll get there as the conversation starts. But the climate problem will really get solved when we have clean products and services. And that's where the biggest challenges lie. So yes, we are making a transition in electric vehicles, but the transition to electric vehicles will only succeed if the renewable energy transition happens very well. And that will only succeed if the battery transition accelerates beyond what we think is possible today. And to go even further, the materials that we use to build the vehicles, such as steel, an industry where Madhulika used to work in before, if steel were to become green and if cement were to become green for the construction sector and so on. So the real progress in decarbonization will happen when we start seeing climate-friendly versions of products and services available for consumers at scale. So that's how we look at it at the Mahindra Group, about embedding sustainability in business, about looking at impact we are having and the outcomes that are possible, and the way forward on solving the climate problem through products and services.
Great. Thank you so much, Anirban. I'm sure the audience will find that really helpful in terms of how Mahindra Group thinks about those building blocks of what it means to integrate sustainability into the business. And thank you for sharing some of the challenges that Victoria also mentioned around how we go about evidencing impacts and what kind of frameworks are available and what kind of frameworks are maybe still being developed. And of course, the point around products and services being a big building block that's needed to ultimately scale the impact to address these challenges. Madhulika, I invite you to share your thoughts on these attributes and how you see that playing out in ITC.
Thanks, Kate. And I think Anirban said it very, aptly, that probably all large organizations who have been up to this, will have the similar kind of answer when it comes to integrating, I think. However, I think from ITC perspective, so again, within India, I think ITC has been well known for its triple bottom line approach and also walking the talk on the whole triple bottom line approach for, more than 2 decades now. And some of the, iconic examples are the e-Chopal, which was there in the agribusiness, which actually brought at that point of time, about 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, an IT platform, digital platform to bring the farmers who are a very significant part of ITC's value chain, to bring it to them and to create value for them, create a mutual value. So ITC has, while it's a one legal entity, it has got 13 different businesses. So what I see as a shift from what has happened last year, which was truly integrating sustainability across business, was that each business was working on its own silo and was working on its own imperatives or challenges. So whether it was the hotels business, they have been having this tagline of responsible luxury, and they have been living this tagline of responsible luxury for now almost more than a decade. I think even before, so one thing which is news, which is trending in India, is the ban of single-use plastics from 1st of July. And the ITC hotels for last 4 or 5 years, I mean, even before the compliance came, they have removed all single-use plastics. And it is very, if you walk into the hotel, you'll actually feel the difference of what it means in walking the talk of responsible luxury. So similarly, the papers division, they have been, significantly working on actually creating a whole forestry program, a nature-based forestry program to supplement their pulpwood and make it very regenerative so that there's no biodiversity loss. But last year, actually, there was a reset of the entire technology, of the entire strategy as a company, ITC as a whole. And if you read whether the chairman's messages or whether it is the sustainability report, then what really happened was this reset. At the core of it was that integration of the whole corporate strategy and business strategy at the intersection of sustainability and digital. And then the whole S 2.0, as we call it, came up. which had, very specific goals on related to climate, related to water, related to biodiversity, and of course, multitude of things which are there. And what happened was that this then became, so while there were some iconic programs, there were other businesses also, who were not, either they were doing because, they felt it was good to do. But what S2.0 is actually doing is that it has created a common minimum agenda across the organization for each business. And each business can, of course, do beyond this, but this is a minimum that they have to do. And once there was a corporate strategy, then what has happened subsequently is that each business has now taken a target which is aligned with the S2.0 targets, which has got a 2030 as a deadline and 2018 as a baseline. The other thing which is actually going to ensure that, we deliver on the targets is that it has been not only been integrated into the whole business strategy. Each business has got sustainability as a strategy, but also I think Anirban alluded to the rewards part, but the whole rewards for the leadership team as well as the leadership -1 team, which is the long-term and the short-term incentive, is now being weaved, and a component on S2.0 is being created. I think that will be a game changer in terms of truly creating an impact. In terms of, I think we have created dashboards at the corporate level. We are creating a dashboard at a business level, and that's where the whole digital piece also comes, because we are talking about 13 different businesses having so much of data and information, and it's not manually possible to collate it. And that's where it becomes, the whole technology piece becomes very, very useful. And we are very lucky to have one IT as part of our business who's coming to the help. So I think this is what is from a true integration across business, also linking it to your rewards and performance, and ensuring that there's a proper review and monitoring across the businesses every quarter. So that's what is going to help us keep on the track. In terms of lessons learned, I think it's very important to, while a business, a corporate, a chairman can take a thing, but to actually percolate it across businesses where they have been doing things, and to say that, okay, this is something new, or this is an addendum that you have to do, is to create, I think, have a very effective dialogue much before you come up with these targets, and keep these dialogues on. And as a sustainability officer who sits at a corporate, I think that's the one major thing that I have learned as a lesson for actually effective deployment. Strategies can be still in the air, but you have to have a deployment plan. And you have to create buy-in with each of the business and facilitate them and show them that, how it can be done. I think that's one of the key lessons that I have learned. In terms of challenges, of course, for a business like ITC, which has got a very big value chain, especially it goes to the farm level. I think when it comes to data, and when we go to the value chain level, then again, we have to look at technologies, because how do we converge the whole information data is something that we are struggling with. But I think, yeah, we will find solutions. And but that's a very big challenge that we are, as of now, faced with, in terms of really integrating it, because unlike steel, which has got significant footprint in its scope 1 and 2, actually I'm now in a sector or sectors which has got a significant scope 3 as its footprint, and to actually aggregate all of that is something that is a big challenge.
Thank you so much, Madhulika. And I think, yeah, key takeaways around integration, going right from the high level strategy and vision, business planning, right the way down to some of those practical considerations and data collection, which looks quite different depending on which sector, which industry you're referring to. Thank you again. So I can see some questions starting to come in. So let's maybe turn to some Q&As. I wanted to pick up on the first question, an interesting observation from Joe. Thank you for your question. Almost half, 4 out of 9 of the corporate sustainability leaders in APAC are from India. So I wonder, Anirban and Madhulika, if you have any reflections on that. What are Indian companies doing well? Is there something around the enabling environment in India, or have companies there been better at communicating across the region their sustainability vision? Any takes from you? maybe Anirban, start with you to kick us off.
Well, I have a blinkered view since I've seen India more than the other countries. And given that the question's coming from Joe, I think I can fairly say that it is because of people like Joe and his cohorts who've been getting organizations like us to become aware of what needs to be done and the actions that must be accelerated, which are possible to accelerate today. In fact, I don't think it's mentioned here, but Joe headed World Business Council for Sustainable Development in India and played a very important role in ensuring that Indian organizations were aware of what needed to be done and took actions so that they were ahead on the sustainability journey. Maybe that's why you see more Indian organizations there in your top 9 today.
Thank you. Madhulika, anything you would add?
No, totally agree with Anirban. I just have an additional take on this. I mean, I could be prejudiced as an Indian, but I think Indian mentality, at least, people coming from my generation, maybe the next generation, I really don't know, but there's a mentality of frugality and finding, ways and means to live in frugality. And I think that there's a spirit of entrepreneurship individually, even if you are working in corporates. I think you want to do your best. Maybe we have been taught right from our school that you have to, you have to be best, you have to be doing this better. And I think that's what is at the back of my mind, at the back of each of everything. And that's why probably, of course, there's a whole new set of, enabling environment, which is now there visible. There's also these, apart from WBCSD, there are very good forums, national forums, which have kind of created a huge capacity for large, masses. Like you have a Confederation of Indian Industry, you have, FICCI and all these industry associations also who have played their part. But I think there's also an Indian spirit, which is like, to give your best, always be number one. You have to, do. And we've always tried, because we have not had a lot of means as a country. I mean, I think that's why probably we kind of try to find solutions which are very economical and practical. So I think that's another take that I have added. Anirban has his hands up.
Yeah, Kate, if I may, we must acknowledge City Developers Limited. They do wonderful work, and I'm glad to see them on the list. I don't know if any of the companies on the list are from Taiwan. On another platform, the GRI platform, I understand the leaders in reporting in Asia, many of them come from Taiwan. I suppose how much an organization is known across the countries in the region and in the world plays a small part in respondents acknowledging their work during the response. So, I mean, in a way, yes, Unilever does a whole lot of work, but then more people know about Unilever around the world than most of the other companies on the list. So probably that plays a little part as well. But we must acknowledge all the other folks around the region who are doing great work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anirban. I think if we look at the list, there's also some great representatives from North Asia, from Australia, for example, who've been called out in the Asia Pacific region. Wanted to next pick up, there's a couple of questions actually, and it links to the point both of you have just made around some of the networks and collaborations in India and in the region. And of course, that was one of the survey findings as well around the role of multi-sector partnerships in driving the agenda forward. And there's a few questions in the chat as well around examples of collaborations. So I wonder if you could each share, maybe perhaps pick one example of a multi-sector collaboration that your companies have been involved in and how that's supported your journey. Madhulika, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So I spoke about eChopal, but now it has it has changed. It's in a new avatar called ITC Mars. Mars has got a big acronym, but basically this is providing a phygital platform which is combining physical and digital, and it's a plug and play platform. So while ITC owns the platform and the back end of the platform, but it is allowing, people to actually come, and the people could be either startups, or people could be suppliers, people could be solution providers, to come and be present on the platform. And we have also created, it's not we, but I think there's an enabling environment of creating FPOs, which is another, kind of assimilation of farmer groups who actually get to benefit. And the whole concept is on collaboration. The whole concept is on creating larger good through multilateral collaborations. And I think it's already up in more than 700 villages, and there are some baseline studies which have said that the value has increased, because it's almost like a one-stop shop for the farmers, and also for solution providers, anything. So I think this is one example that I would actually like to highlight.
Great, thanks, Madhulika. Anirban, invite you to share one collaboration partnership example.
Yes, of course, there are so many to choose from, but it's important to acknowledge that this is not a competitive game. We will win if everybody wins together. So you can't have a sustainable business in an unsustainable world. And every stakeholder has a role to play. So government has a role to play, and business has a role to play, and the non-profits have a role to play. And to solve the problem that we're trying to solve, we've got to choose the appropriate collaborations and partnerships. So if I were to take an example in decarbonization, the easiest place and the best place to start is energy efficiency. And to be able to do energy efficiency, you need a lot of new energy efficient devices, things that were not available maybe 5 or 6 years ago, or even 10 years ago. So we have a partnership with an organization called Energy Efficiency Services Limited. It's a government sector organization which brings in very good energy efficient devices into the country from wherever they're available in the world, aggregates demand to help drive prices down. And those of us who have adopted those devices at scale have been able to implement energy efficiency measures, which are very, very impactful, which is why I'm able to say today that over a 10-year period, the amount of energy required to manufacture a vehicle is 60% less as of the end of March 22. Actually, as the volumes pick up, the impact will increase even more, because the devices have already been put in place. And as capacity utilization increases, the environmental impact of reduced energy to produce a vehicle is just going to keep on increasing. So this is one partnership which has helped us a lot, and I suspect helped many other manufacturing organizations a lot too.
Excellent. Thank you both for sharing those examples. I think, thank you all for your questions. We probably have time for one more, but feel free to post in the chat and we can pick up on anything after the webinar as well. So let me close with a question from Sandeep Kumar. Thank you for your question. Specifically asking around technology and what kind of technologies your businesses have been integrating to support your sustainability management. I guess this could include both digital technologies, but also other types of technologies in your processes, for example. So maybe in the last minute, Anirban, if you wanted to pick one example of using technology for sustainability.
This would be a very sector-based answer. So for the automotive industry, technologies in EVs, technologies in batteries are things that we're looking at very, very closely. We are also looking at IT technologies to increase the efficiency of battery utilization, increasing the range and so on. So depending on the products and services offered and the way they are made, there are technologies that each industry will focus on.
Thank you. Madhulika, over to you.
I'll actually say two technologies, because there's a large manufacturing setup, probably to get the information real-time data. So it's about all sensor-based data collection and integrating it directly with the whole system so that you have data information available. From a value chain perspective, I think blockchain technology, because to get traceability at the farm level, I think that's the only technology that needs to be established, piloted, and scaled up in the country to actually, go it where it's very dispersed. I think these are two new technologies that we are looking at.
Great, thank you. I can see we're at the top of the hour or half past, depending where you're joining us from. So maybe just by way of closing, wanted to extend another big thank you to our panelists today, to Anaban, to Madhulika, and of course to Victoria. And thank you very much everyone for joining us. We hope this has left you with some key takeaways around sustainability leadership in Asia Pacific. There's a few questions we didn't get to. We'll try our best to pick up offline. And to close, we really welcome your feedback. So you should see a feedback poll appear, or you can scan this QR code. And with that, we can close, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.